small group. I don't know if we need a mic, but I'll pass it along. I don't know how long it is for the panelists. You guys can move up. It's a tight-knit group. If we don't bite, maybe a little bit. You can move up. I don't know who the reserve was before. Yeah. Sharina, you have to start calling people. You can move up. Okay. I see people moving. Thank you. I don't know why Michelle's back there. Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's cold and chilly and holiday season, but we really wanted to round out our Hip Hop 50 celebrations in Queens with this panel. As a person who interacts in different spaces and places, this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, and I think we need to continue to have conversations around hip hop's influence on social justice and politics. Today we find ourselves at the nexus of history, artistry, and activism, commemorating the 50th anniversary of a genre that has become not just a musical movement, but a powerful force for societal change. Queens, with its diverse communities and unwavering spirit, has been vital for hip-hop's development. Tonight, we have the honor of hearing from a distinguished panel, trailblazers in their own right, many of which are my friends, so thank you so much. I love you guys for always coming through with the 1-2. So Sir J.T. Thompson, CEO, founder, executive producer of the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. Carmen Perez Jordan, president and CEO of the Gallery for Justice, and Big Sis. My son Lennon, my big bro, artist and co-founder of Until Freedom, and Jay Jordan, co-founder of Time Done USA, who's also here this evening. Their experiences bring rich perspectives to the intersection of hip-hop, social justice, and politics. Throughout this evening, our dialogue will transcend the bounds of music, delving into hip-hop's role as a catalyst for social change and political activism. Our esteemed panelists will share insights into hip-hop and how it has shaped our cultural landscape and served as a powerful vehicle for advocacy and community engagement. Just one thing I want to say quickly about the moderator, which is Jeff Coltin. He covers City Hall Press. And he did a great front page article on the influence of hip hop in New York City. And as soon as he did that article, I'm like, Jeff, you have to moderate a panel, because I think journalism really codifies these experiences in a beautiful way. So I'm excited that you're here, and thank you for moderating the panel. So in the spirit of nuanced exploration, our goal today is really to extend beyond reflecting on the past 50 years. We really aim to dissect the intricate tapestry that weaves hip-hop and politics together in our contemporary culture, of fusion carrying the potential to ignite social change, challenge systematic norms, and redefine the narrative of our collective future. I'm thrilled to introduce, again, our moderator, who will kick us off into this panel, guiding us through all of the nuances that I just mentioned. And one of the things, I might mention it towards the end, we have an opportunity, especially me and the council, to do things that further the culture in a positive way. And with hip hop, they love our music, they love our culture, but we also get criminalized in the process. So one of the bills that I am working really hard with my state colleagues, hopefully they can pass it. It keeps passing the Senate, but it's not passing the state assembly, is a bill that would ban the usage of essentially rap lyrics in court. So many rappers have been convicted for rap lyrics, and I think it's crazy that we are turning creative expression into something that can be used in the court of law. And so when I think about actual bills and legislation that can change our lives, especially those communities where hip hop is birthed from, to me it screams an acknowledgement and also a charge for us to continue to fuse these worlds together to better our community. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the panel.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Thank you all for being being here. Again, I'm Jeff Coltin. I'm a reporter with Politico, and yeah, I wrote about hip hop and politics, and so I have the privilege of now getting to ask even more questions to these panelists. We're going to try and break this up somewhat into two things. We're going to do social justice and hip hop, and we're going to do hip hop and politics. But of course, there's going to be a lot of crossover. So at the beginning, I'm going to try and focus here on my son and Jay. But you know what? I see that maybe JT, maybe Carmen might have to jump in at some point, and we might just make this one conversation. So we'll see where it goes. I guess I want to start out by doing a brief introduction. Jay, what are your credentials? What brings you here? And I guess if I can also say specifically, I know I have an interest in this ban the box idea, ban the box legislation. There's some New York action happening on that. So if you could also introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role there.
Why you choose me first, man? I don't need the mic. How y'all doing? Good? Yeah. I'm Jay Jordan. I come from North Stockton, California, by way of Jersey. I live in Jersey now. And about 11 years ago, I was released from prison after doing 7 years for robbery. And when I got out, I had this big vision to take over the world, right? I was like, I'm gonna sell insurance, used cars, real estate, do it all out of a barbershop when I cut hair. I quickly found out that I couldn't get my cosmetology license. I couldn't get my insurance license, couldn't sell used cars, couldn't sell real estate because of something called collateral consequences. There are about 40,000 legal restrictions that kick in after someone serves their time. 40,000 legal restrictions that kick in after somebody serves their time. So when I was released from prison, 40,000 legal restrictions, 40,000 laws on the books kicked in that lasted me for the rest of my life. It denied me access to entire economic sectors. And a lot of these sectors in small towns like Stockton are growth sectors, like healthcare, education, and government. A lot of people work for the county, they work for the hospital, they work for the school district. I couldn't work for any of those. And so it took me about 3 years, a lot of work and denial and being homeless and alcohol addiction to get involved with an organization that was fighting against this in California. And we launched something called Time Done. 7 years later, we were able to fix the broken expungement system in California. Now everyone in California now has access to expungement 2 years after they were released from prison. I was the first one to file under that new statute. To date, there have been close to 500,000 people. There are about 8 million people eligible, about 200 million records that will be cleared in California. And this is not just clearing records, this is building pathways to economic opportunity and safety for families. This has been my life's work. I have since retired this year. I'm done. After I passed that law and I got free, I said, what does freedom actually look like? So I'm enjoying time in Jersey with my wife, Carmen, and my 2 kids and my 2 dogs. And lucky to be here, happy to be here, and looking forward to the conversation.
That was a little surprising question.
Incredible.
That's great. So, my son, what brings you here within this conversation, and how do you meld hip hop and politics, or hip hop and social justice in this case?
Okay. How you doing, everybody? Yes. Okay, so my name is Marcel Leonard. I am a hip hop artist and activist. I am one of the co-founders of the organization called Until Freedom. In 1998, I was convicted of a armed robbery case charge that I was wrongfully convicted of, and I actually served 7 out of 7 14-year sentence. At that time, I had $1 million record deal. I was signed to Def Jam Records. I was signed by the late great Chris Lyne, who was my mentor, RIP to him. And I was a novice. I thought the innocent people didn't go to jail. I was like, you're innocent, you just don't go to jail. First they offered me a year in prison, and I had just signed a record deal, $1 million record deal, and they told me that they made me go through a lineup, picked me off the street, and said that I looked like somebody, and they put me in a lineup. And they did it to me twice, you know, and so I fought my case. You know, I went to trial, and unfortunately I was found guilty, and I served, like I said, I served 7 to 14 years, and I had a 7 to 14 year sentence, and I served 7 years, and then I served 4 years on parole and actually was released. So my own, you know, experience made me understand the legal system and the injustice system. You know, and I kept seeing that there were young black and brown boys, mainly boys coming to prison with the same exact story. You know, some of them had actually done crimes, but they were doing 10 years for probably stealing something from a store. You know, a 16 and 17-year-old kid was a 16 and 17-year-old kid was locked up for 20 and 25 years for what they called armed robbery because they said they thought he had a gun. He was never actually found with a gun. And a lady said that he stole $1 from him. And he was doing 25 years in prison. And I was like, well, I understand there should be consequences, but 25 years in prison for a kid doesn't even make sense. You know, so that became one of my life's work to try to figure out how do we fix this injustice system. Also, how do we retrain the minds of the young kids who have been caught up in the culture of crime and violence. Being a hip hop artist, understanding the messaging in music, and understanding that even though a lot of it comes from our life experience, a lot of time those experiences are glorified. And it gives this false reality to our children that this is what's cool to do. You know, and I wanted to come home and change that narrative and tell them the real things that were happening in prison. You know, and tell them how, you know, you're not even considered a man inside of prison. A CO can walk in your cell and tell you to strip and butt naked in front of him and take everything and throw all your stuff on the floor, which they did on many days. You know, they would find comfort in trying to take your manhood from you. And I didn't want these young kids to experience anything like that. So when I came home, my first objective was to change that narrative and start to change the mind states of our kids and let them understand that there's nothing to glorify about this criminality. You know, as we, unfortunately, in our communities, jail is like a rite of passage. You know, we glorify the kid who comes home from jail. He's, you know, he tells you these stories about how he was tough and the girls was visiting him and he had lockdown and he was the man in jail. And you sit there as a young kid and you see everybody idolizing this individual and you feel like in order for you to get this level of respect, then you have to go through what he went through. And it was a false, we was taught wrong. And because somebody taught them wrong, they kept teaching the same thing. And when I got inside those cells, I said, I don't want to be here. There's nothing in here that I can do. Like, you know, so, you know, I wanted to come home and dispel those myths. And then as I came home and started to do that work, you know, what happened was I got involved with social justice work at the time during Eric Gardner. You know, I had met Carmen and I was doing work with Carmen in detention centers in which we were going, utilizing music and teaching the kids music as a way of alternative to violence inside the detention centers. And the Eric Garner case happened. And I remember that was the first time I ever went to a protest. I had never been to a protest prior to Eric Garner's. And it was about, if you remember, it was probably about 50,000 people, 100,000 people in the streets of New York. And I remember I said, this is the work I want to do. You know, I want to make sure that I'm on the front lines of this work, making sure that justice is given as I save these kids from going to prison. So that's my mission.
Now, both of you, I mean, it's, you know, small-time activism is one thing, but it seems like you guys both went through experiences and now aren't just trying to change your community, but they're trying to change even bigger pictures. I mean, I think I saw that you were actually did a little civil disobedience, were arrested protesting the Supreme Court, right? Brett Kavanaugh, and now you're doing things nationwide. I guess I'll start with you. I just want to talk about the scope of this. I mean, what's inspired you to, again, not just focus on your neighborhood, not just focus on your community, but focus bigger picture? Is it something within you or something in your experiences that has pushed to reach that high?
Oh man, okay, here we go. The American justice system is the second largest employer in the world. The U.S. American justice system is the second largest employer in the entire world. That's including corporations, governments, everybody. The first employer is the U.S. Department of Defense. The second employer is the U.S. justice system. The third employer is Walmart. Look it up, Google it. They employ 2.5 million people. And this justice system spends about $300 billion every single year of your tax dollars. And the kicker is that it does not provide safety or justice. It responds to crime. This entire apparatus, $300 billion, waits for a crime to occur and then reacts to that crime. They're not taking guns out of young boys' hands. They're not stopping young girls from getting abducted and human trafficked. They're not stopping fentanyl crisis. They are waiting for people to be in crisis, and when that crisis turns to crime, this thing turns on. And then the narrative is, this is public safety. How is that safety when you're not keeping our community safe, and all the money to keep us safe is tied up in crime response? That's the problem I have. And as a result, for the last 30 years, they put 6,000 laws on the books to criminalize people. And every single year, this is something that people have to pay attention to. Your state government and your federal government continuously puts laws on the books to criminalize people. Me and my son standing on the street corner 20 years ago was not a crime. Well, 30 years ago, 30 years ago. It was not a crime. Now, it is a crime if we stand on certain corners because we have affiliation with the justice system. Somebody passed that law to criminalize people, and they continuously do that. In California, my state, we passed over 1,000 tough on crime laws in 30 years, and guess what happened? We exported the war on drugs, exported 3 strikes, exported Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. We exported mass incarceration. We built 50 prisons. Get this, in 2010, in California, and like every other state in this union, prison population in California was about 190,000 people. We spent $10 billion housing 190,000 people. 10 years go by, a lot of activism, we reduced that by 90,000. Now there's only 100,000 people in prison. Wouldn't you think that the cost to house 100,000 people is less than the cost to house 190,000 people? No! A net increase of $5 billion we spend on prison. Now we spend $15 billion on prison. So we follow the money. I began to follow the money, and what I realized is that when I look in our conditions in our neighborhoods, and I'm crying out, where are the resources? Where are the resources? Every time we talk about safety in our community, which we all care about, I don't want to see young boys and young girls get killed and murdered and addicted and mental illness and all that stuff. Where's the money to stop it? We turn on the news and they're like, we need more money for cops. Every time in the 70s, we asked for addiction services. We got war on drugs, war on crime. In the 80s, we asked for addiction services and housing. We got the war on drugs, war on crime. In the 90s, we asked for housing and economic justice. We got the war on crime. They keep giving us war and funding government bureaucracy. Get that. Your money is not going to safety, it's going back into government. The criminal justice system is a large government bureaucracy. When I realized that, and I followed the money, and I realized what they were doing lastly, that all of this resulted in 70 to 100 million people having a criminal record. 70 to 100 million people. That's more than the entire country of Canada. That's about New York and California combined. And they face 40,000 legal restrictions for the rest of their life. Somebody got to stand up. So I said, fuck it. Excuse my language.
Yeah. My son, you tell me it goes all the way to the top. You know, what brought you to the Supreme Court? And again, same question, it's a big picture. What got you reaching high?
I think what got me reaching high was just understanding that there wasn't someone like me inside this space, right? When I first got to this space, I didn't feel welcome, right? It's not so much I didn't feel welcome, I just didn't feel like I fit. I felt like I was formerly incarcerated. I was in a room with college, individuals, and people who were well-spoken, people who were well-dressed and had suits on, and I was this kid from the hood who just wanted to save people. I just wanted to do the work. And I was like, and I started saying the reason why there's no one doing the work from our community is because there's no one that they can relate to. I didn't feel like I was able to relate to a lot of people. It wasn't for Carmen making me feel, say her, or Tamika, and Linda making me feel like my word mattered, like my opinion mattered, that I had something to say, that the things that I was saying were necessary to be heard. I wouldn't have done that. And I was like, there's so many people from our communities that want to do this work. They want to stand up. They want to be on the front. A lot of them, when they started seeing me do this work, they was like, wow, I want to do that, but I can't. And I'm like, why can't you? What stops you from speaking truth to power? What stops you from standing on the front line and standing next to people against injustice? What stops you from doing it? There's no criteria. There's nothing that stops you. There's nothing that limits you. And I think that's what really got me involved in it. I said to myself that there's a lack of someone that represents where I'm from. So I wanted to be that conduit between the streets and the suites, between civil rights. I wanted civil rights to look like me. I wanted people, so I started bringing people from the community. They started coming out to rallies because they were inspired by me. They started to want to do this work. They started to say, yo, I see you doing work with the children in the community. I want to be a part of that. I see you doing anti-violence work. I want to come join you. People who normally formerly incarcerated individuals who have changed their lives around, who didn't know what they could do, but felt like they wanted to be a part of something. So I said, this is what I'm going to do. I want to create national movements. I want to go around the country and grab individuals that look like me, that come from the same realities that I come from, who have the same experiences that I come from, that really want to do this work, that want to be, viable parts of the community, and I want to form unity. So that was one of the things that started the Boycott Black Murder movement, the Raising Kings movement, and those are two national movements that I started within Until Freedom. So I really just wanted the world to embrace people that come from our community. I wanted us to feel like we have value. The same, it's pretty much the same thing that Jay is saying. He's like, we have all these collateral damages, that limits us from being able to be great. And I wanted to grab the people who actually wanted to be great, who may have made mistakes, who come from different communities, who come from poverty, who don't understand that their voices count and their opinions matter, and they can do something different. So that's what inspired me.
So we're talking about this continued, society that doesn't believe in forgiveness and redemption. Now, I don't know if you guys have been reading your Politico, following your local news. Tomorrow, the city council member, and also the rest of the city council, they're going to pass a couple really interesting bills. One of them about what happens inside are really hard limits on solitary confinement. And then another one that bans background checks in most cases for apartments. If you're renting an apartment, that's been a huge barrier for people coming out of prison, coming out of jail. I know that the caucuses you've been a part of have been really supportive of these. I imagine you voting yes tomorrow?
Yes, my name.
There you go. So again, big deal. This is the last one in the year. Talking about those, I'm wondering if you guys have feedback on that. Talking about the barriers to re-entry, and one of them definitely being residential housing. So
it was crazy is, so you get into this and you start going down rabbit holes. Like I'm like a nerd and researcher at heart. I may not look like it, but man, you give me Google and some Wikipedia, and I go for hours. And that's what happened. I spent 2 years in deep in research. I'm not a researcher. I was a jailhouse attorney trying to get out early. That's it. Writing a bunch of writs of habeas corpuses, give me liberty or give me death. You know what I mean? But never really got involved with it. And as we got deep into the research, what we realized is all criminal records are is a line of data. And they live in 4 different databases. You have the FBI database, which never goes away. You get arrested, any contact with the criminal justice system, the FBI gets it, it never goes away, can never be erased, it stays there. Then you have the state level. So in some states it's the state police, other states it's the State Department of Justice. This is where you give your fingerprints. Whoever gave your fingerprints, you get a background check. That's called a live scan, right? That shows what is called a CORI, a criminal offender record of information. So even if your record was expunged, it shows robbery, then under it shows expunged. So if you're looking at it, you see everything, right? Never goes away, never gets erased, right? It stays in that database. The other database, which is the most interesting one, is the court level databases. This is what housing providers, or better yet, property management companies have access to. This data is for sale. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Multi-billion-dollar industry that was launched after 9/11. Pre 9/11, less than 30% of landlords and employers were doing background checks. Post 9/11, we were living in a fear-based economy. What happened? Background check everybody, right? I'm not a terrorist, but they put me in that category. Now 9 out of 10 landlords and employers do background checks, and they go to these consumer reporting agencies called CRAs, basically background check companies like Checker and whoever else, People Finder, and those folks buy the data from the courthouse. And they aggregate the data, and they have these shadow databases, and so your property management company will sell you that data. That's why people are denied housing, because property management companies go to consumer reporting agencies, buy the data in the name of safety, which have nothing to do with your ability to rent or maintain your property, maintain the property, right? Like that's where the data comes in at. And then the last database, which is the tricky one, which is why a lot of people get killed by the hands of police, this is my hypothesis, is this is the police database. This is the database that every cop has in their car. When they pull you over, and if you are registered to a car, or if you're anywhere around that car and they're pulling it over, your entire criminal history pops up. So what happened when they showed up at George Floyd? Felon. It heightens the security of the cop. So these databases is what creates this demand for the data. So industries like landlords or licensing agencies buy that data and then deny people based on that data. But they don't care about how old the data is. There are some rules that say, the data is supposed to be non-reportable after 7 years or 10 years, but because they have these shadow databases and they aggregate the data, it never goes away. You have some people who call me, I get these calls on a daily basis, they're like, Jay, I had a record 20 years ago and it's popping up on a simple background check. It's because a shadow database from a consumer reporting agency is reporting that data. And so while banning the box is extremely important, right? Both for employment and for housing, I love what they did in Atlanta, which they basically said, if you have a criminal record and you are deemed rehabilitated, you are part of that protected class, therefore you cannot be discriminated against. And so putting all this into a bucket is important, right? Giving a person the opportunity to remove the record. Ensuring that if a person shows they've earned their redemption, they're back into society, and they're trying to rent a house, they're trying to rent an apartment, why would you deny someone access to housing when America is experiencing a homelessness crisis? That does not make any economic or public safety sense whatsoever. This is not a public safety issue. This is a public health issue. So when we put things into the public safety category, you get this false sense of, well, I don't know if this person is going to wreck my apartment. If this person is making $60,000 a year, $40,000 a year, they're asking you to rent your apartment, they're asking you because they want a place to live, not a place to party. Last thing I'll say on this is it's really important because it goes beyond just the laws. We are talking about someone's humanity. This is our humanity at stake. When you tell me I'm not good enough to rent an apartment, I'm not good enough to have my baby sleep under a roof, you are denying me my humanity. How long does it take for me to regain my humanity back? We are not full citizens. If I can't rent an apartment for my babies, how am I an American citizen? If I'm paying taxes the same as you, but I have no representation, I have no access to the same things that you have access to, and we're saying we're taxing the same marginal tax rate? How is that right? How am I a citizen? So we have to stop talking about this as a public safety issue and move it into a public health issue and connect the dots to what is happening right now in the streets, to what is happening in the state houses and the city hall houses. Sister, I commend you for doing this. This is something that states and cities don't have the balls to do, but y'all are doing it, and it is going to be transformative, because when you look outside and people are sleeping on the streets and you ask them what was the interruption in your life, 70% of those folks are going to say, well, I got locked up 10 years ago.
My further thoughts on that?
I mean, I think he pretty much summed it up.
There's not much
What
left
else
to say.
you say? I mean, as far as I know you said solitary confinement.
That's another bill passed.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things that how I met Natasha. We were actually going protesting in Albany. And she was working in Albany, and we went up there to fight against solitary confinement. And having first-hand knowledge of solitary confinement, it's pretty much inhumane. But it is. I say anytime that you are placed in solitary confinement for over 60 days, at least I believe that you need mental health. You need to deal with a psychiatrist. It takes away from your ability to just coexist with people after that. There's a level of seclusion that when I came home from prison, and interaction was different. And I didn't notice it because, I had just came from being incarcerated around a lot of people who had the same problem. But when I got to society, it was a lot of people that just noticed it. Like, my mother was like, you all right? I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And I couldn't really be around people. Even to this day, I can't be around people for too long. I just can't. Like, even to this day, like, sometimes I just gotta be in my house. Like, I used to have this conversation with my wife. She used to be like, why are you going outside? I'm like, go outside. And if she leave, I can stay in the house all day. But if I was in the house and she was there, she was like, why do you gotta go outside? I'm like, I just going to get some air. Like, I just needed some level of my own seclusion. And I know it came from solitary because I had normalized it, and I know people that I know who've been in solitary confinement for 5 and 6 and 7 years, and you can literally just look and see how it affected them. So I think solitary confinement is something that's definitely inhumane. It's definitely it's punitive. It's not rehabilitative. It is punitive, and it definitely deals with infringing upon your mental status.
What's crazy about that is if you lock your dog up for too long, they'll come and lock you up.
That's right.
We've been talking so much about social justice directly, we barely even touched upon the hip hop, so I do want to jump back to that. I mean, as the member mentioned,
Hip hop.
criminalization of lyrics is a big issue. A lot of people have been trying to change. We see that, I think, across the nation. District attorneys, prosecutors are saying, well, look, in his song, he said he was going to kill a guy, therefore, lock him up. I guess I want to start with my son, just as an artist. I mean, has this ever been an issue directly, or do you have other artists you've worked with? Has this been something that there's also been organizing around to change?
Well, they did it to me in my trial. I had rapped about a robbery, and they presented the lyric that I said.
Yeah, he's a robber.
He's a robber. You know what I'm saying? And I know that it affected the jury's perception, and it wasn't something I just made up. And I'm, just talking about things that go on in the community, people getting robbed, and they utilize it. And I know that.
And hip hop's treated totally differently there, right? I mean, if somebody writes a rock song about something, they think it's
never even been something that's even been, brought up other than in hip hop. And unfortunately, I tell a lot of hip hop artists you have to be very careful. You know, you have to be very careful about what you rap about, how you rap about it, and then you got to also be careful about who you're around. You know, you can if you're around people that are doing the things that you're rapping about, they're gonna connect those dots. You know, they're gonna say that you're the person that did it. You look, he said this, and those people they was doing it, so he was involved. You know, and I think, and I say that we have to have some level of accountability, but I definitely don't believe that you should be able to utilize just lyrics in chief to pretty much convict somebody of a crime. I think that is insane. Like, you have to have evidence that a crime was committed. You're taking these people's lives away because of entertainment. You know, unfortunately, you know, when we rap about crimes, like I said, you know, the glorification of criminality in our community, in our music, is something that has been socially accepted, unfortunately. But you're taking these young kids who come from nothing, who only seen and been exposed to his crime and drugs and all these things, and they've been taught that's something to glorify, so they start talking about it, and then they see this is a way for them to get out of the, you know, the poverty that they're living in. These kids, and you have to look at the reality of what's going on. These kids are being paid. They're being paid to talk about crime, to criminalize the culture. They're being paid to teach these other young kids that criminality is the way to get out of the community. If we talk about positive things, nobody wants to hear it. It's not pushed. You know, I say this all the time. In this industry, you know, I heard Meek Mill say it the other day. He said, we're actually being paid to talk about drugs, murder, and crime all the time. You know, I had an interview the other day with a good friend Sway, and he was talking about it, and I was like, how do you tell a kid that's 15, 16 years old that's about to get $1 million because he raps about crime in the street to stop doing it when you don't have the alternative, and you're not giving him nothing else? If he talks about something positive, they don't see a positive artist that's winning. So what do we tell these? What are we telling these kids? So it's just like it's the street to prison pop. Right? It ain't the school, because they understand. You know, they understand that if we celebrate and we pay these kids and we incentivize them to talk about violence and negativity, and then we can lock them up for it. You know, and then we can actually get somebody killed because of it, and we take out insurance on the kids who rap about the things that's actually in the streets, right? We can lock them up, put them in jail, and we can make money off it. And we can put them in prison.
That's a double-edged sword.
Two quick points of this. This is really interesting because we were just talking about the other night. Well, one, if we're talking about like lyrics or creative expression can be used to justify criminal intent, then Stephen King should be under the jail.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? I don't know. Read a Stephen King now. That dude is sick. He's sick, man. You know what I mean? Who wrote Silence of the Lambs? Who wrote all these horror movies? You know what I mean? Like, they should be under the jail then.
It goes back to Frankenstein.
Yeah. You know, because somewhere along all these crazy video games,
Yes.
I met this dude who cleaned up crime scenes. Crazy interaction. He's a stoic guy, right? And I'm like, well, what do you see in these crime scenes? He said, well, suicide, and this is a trigger word, I'm sorry. He said, well, people who commit suicide, they always have these war games, Call of Duty, GTA, propelling people to do this. So if we're going to say creative expression can validate criminal intent, then the whole industry needs to be under jail. Thing one. Thing two, really quick. What Mice was talking about. Who do you think pushes out the records?
Yeah.
These dudes, they won't even release a positive song. You know what I mean? These dudes, they have no control over their music. You know what I mean? Like, they don't even have control over the stuff that gets on their album sometimes. They're in these 360 record deals that say they don't own their publishing, they don't own their master, they don't own anything. They got to advance, and they're like, nigga, you go write this song, and this is what we're gonna play ads against. So Spotify, I was talking to a guy on the way over here, he was telling me that the money from music isn't by record sales anymore. You're not going out and buying CDs. Who bought a CD in the last year? Anybody buying CDs? You're not even buying streams anymore. You're not going on Spotify and paying for every song. The way the money gets paid is through ads. Dove and Kaiser and all these Fortune 500 companies are buying ads against music. And the music that they're buying ads against is like drill rap. So it's an ever-ending cycle, and the record companies are like, hey, listen, we want this music out there, so we're going to put these people in places and put marketing dollars behind the Ice Spice instead of behind the Money Sign. But just because somebody's at the top of the charts is not because the music is hot, it's because there's marketing dollars behind it. What Carmen was telling me, Barbie spent, what, $500 million in marketing? Oh, $100 million in marketing? Oh my God, Barbie is so big. No, Barbie was everywhere. So you thought Barbie was big. I watched it, it was a boring movie. It was a boring movie, and I'm like, yo, all this hype, because $100 million you thought it was. So what you're seeing, these kids are seeing this stuff, and they're seeing them on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all the streaming platforms, and they have doom scrolling. Everybody's like this, just scrolling, and 15-second clips, kill a nigga, 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 kill a nigga. That's all they're doing, and then, when somebody actually does it, you go and you lock them up for it.
Yeah.
Put the record industries in jail. Put the labels in jail.
Thank you. I said that.
So, let me just say, sorry, I've had my back practically turned on this side of the table, but that was because there was like a curtain. Now we're raising the curtain, you know? We're expanding here, and I do want to bring y'all into that conversation. So please, JT, first of all, brief introduction, who you are, what brings you here, and then
I want to leave the hot topic yet, though.
Let's give you your flowers right now.
My name is Sir J.T. Thompson. I'm a Brooklyn-born, Hollis and St. Albans, Queens, raised cat before my mother moved to Harlem.
I'm sorry, with that history, you might need to it's not even 50.
It's all good. I'm a Brooklyn-born, Kings County guy, but raised in St. Albans and Hollis, Queens, with my grandparents. My mother lived in Harlem, and I left my grandparents and went to Harlem. I met my grandfather's brother. His name was Carl Fry. He played with Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, Cat Calloway. I seen him. I was a kid. I didn't understand it, but in those pictures, and his name is on the records. I say that to you because being a third generation from that, in hip hop, they played in places where they couldn't eat and where they couldn't sleep, and they never got a chance to own their music or their publishing. My story in hip hop also takes me, shout out to the Bay, Stockton, all that, you know what I mean? In Cali, I moved to California. I lived with my mother, single mother. We moved like 10 times throughout all. I lived in Watts, I lived in South Central, the West Side, the real West Side, right? All throughout Los Angeles. I wouldn't have known that except I was a two-sport star in football and basketball, thank you for the New York ball playing habits. And what it ended up doing was it took me to different places, from being a champion to also now getting a college scholarship, but also being in the military, and then going overseas, right? So I thought I was poor growing up until I seen poor people. Then when I seen poor people, I'm like, man, in the Dump Art Projects and those spots we was living in, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, right? So who would have known after coming back to Los Angeles, the Rodney King era? Rodney King beating, then the Rodney King verdict came down. So the gang truce was formed in Watts with Daoud and the brothers from the Imperial Courts, Nicholson Gardens, and this projects of Watts, y'all, this is each other. Then the next thing you know, I knew these guys after the riots was going on. I was a part of a group. Obama talked about being a community organizer. Well, in hip hop, bro, we not just organizers, we actually lead, right? We actually had to get out there to the forefront and bring together the different groups of people at First AME Church to actually figure out how we can form public and private partnerships. It was scary, as my son said, because we didn't look the part, you know what I mean? But after meeting with people, thank goodness for Congresswoman Maxine Waters, my godmother, and working with Tom Bradley, the mayor and all that, who would have known that moving those 10 times I told you guys about, I invited the shot callers from those different areas because I had the respect in the street as well as a ball player. Now, real OGs, big bro, real OGs, they would have kicked your behind if they see you out on the street with them doing what they were doing. Those were what the real OGs did. It's like, you got the potential to help bring us up out of here. So we kind of lost that real OG. The word OG now has been disenfranchised into something else, right? So I say this to say, we brought these gentlemen together at my house, and then we went back out, we formed the LA Gang Truce Alliance, which you've seen in the movie Straight Outta Compton, when the Rags came together and the story of Stanley Tookie. All the footage you've seen, that was the movement that we created. And I think Sister Soldier, she came out to LA with us at UCLA. It was the hip hop fight the power era. We helped lead that. That became the empowerment zones, what they call opportunity zones today. But the thing is, when those opportunity empowerment zones was formed, it was for us to own the businesses in our local community, not for the big box stores to come in and knock out all the mom and pop stores. So the Hip Hop Hall of Fame was created out of this movement. That's how I ended up going to the Bay Area. Shout out to the Bay. I learned the real independent music game, E42, Short Master P. I have my own record label. I put out the Who Riders, so you know about that from the Bay. And then the good piece about it is, I learned that we got $8 out of 10. So we had an 80% deal. Ownership is what's missing. So that's why I was getting ready to get into that conversation about what's really missing. So I bring up the Fight the Power era. We come back home. We produce the Hall of Fame Awards TV show at the Victoria Theater. We got a good deal with BET. Everything's rolling. We're going to do it like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Do shows for the next 10 years. Open up the Hall of Fame. And lo and behold, Tupac gets killed literally 7 days after the broadcast. And he talked about Dove soap and all the other commodities that invest in advertising. Well, we lost the Kool-Aid Man, Kraft Macaroni and Cheese, all the big brands, because they didn't want to be associated with hip-hop and violence, especially with the fake East Coast, West Coast piece that was being done by those in power to foster revenues and profits. That's how Biggie and Tupac got killed, if you did not know. So we got a new deal to get ready to announce if Biggie gets killed. So that knocked all independent hip-hop off the air. So we're fortunate now that we're back after doing the Black College Battle of Bands, college step shows, doing all different types of events with HBCUs, as well as live events with Live Nation, that we're now back with our own ownership piece for the Hall of Fame in Midtown, joint venture, where it's not just a Hall of Fame, but it has a hotel, retail, and residential complex that is a 50-50 joint venture between us, looking like us, people of color, as well as those who don't look like us, where the money comes from Wall Street. So I share that with you to say, we need to look at this perspective. Now I can get into the topic. The music, we lost the art of creative storytelling. I know y'all remember Dougie Fresh, Slick Rick, all the different artists in the golden era. The art of creative storytelling, but that goes back to toasting. That goes back to all of our ancestors telling the story of the colonists and the enslavers, and all the things that we passed down for generations. That is now becoming criminalized. So Public Enemy made Fight the Power and talked about 911's a joke. You going to jail for that now? That's crazy. So my whole thing is the streaming piece. What makes the streaming so difficult, I want everybody to understand, except we haven't bought a CD, we got tech companies coming now, black-owned, minority-owned companies, brother, that's putting out a new tech platform where we can own everything. From our artists can own not just their music, they can sell their music, do their streaming, their pay-per-view, all that, and only have to pay a nominal fee like it was when we were doing independent releases. You're going to hear about that. It's called You Own It. It's based in Harlem, come out of the Harlem Week celebration and the groups in that. So I brought that up to say this about the streaming. The labels are partners in the streaming companies. So the reason why Snoop says, I got 2 billion streams and I got a check for 45,000 coming is because the labels co-own it. So now the publishing and the music on the streaming platforms are sold at a discount. So now that discount now empowers the streaming services to now, like Spotify is about to cut back on the amount of money that they give artists for their music. So the question is, how do we overcome a behemoth like that? It has to go back to ownership, housing, everything you talked about. It has to come back to economic development. It has to come back with us finding a way not just to buy the block, right, but build some infrastructure, put up funds for minorities and other folks in our communities to open up the businesses in our communities and give them technological support, whether that's MBAs from the colleges and universities, whatever it takes for us to reinforce ownership in our community. That's the part that's missing. That's why we can't control everything. We always going to have to figure out how we're going to have to vote for this and hope someone finds a way for us.
You want to take this one as well? You got thoughts on
Come on, sis.
What do you want me to say?
It's your flowers, like you told me.
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, briefly introduce yourself, what brings you to this discussion, intersection of hip hop and politics, and then you want to talk about criminalizing lyrics. I think that's where we started with this.
Well, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing in this cold weather? Thank you so much for being out here. My name is Perez Jordan. I'm originally from Altoona, California, which is right outside of Los Angeles. It's kind of like where all the gang members fled to. And I like to say it's where the strawberries meet the ocean. I grew up in a community that was plagued by violence. When I think about hip hop, I'm 46 years old. I was raised with hip hop, and hip hop was actually my life. But it's what saved me. I grew up the youngest of five. My family's, multiple generation of gang membership, multiple generation of incarceration. During the time I was growing up, I was watching my uncles coming down the alley as heroin addicts. We called them pecatos. And faced a lot of violence, not just in my community with police surveillance and gangs, but also in my home. And, for me, my older brothers, who are 14, 7 years older than me, were listening to NWA. And so I was like, I think, when people look at me, they're like, yo, why are you so radical? And I'm like, because the music at home was radical. My brothers were also musicians, and when I was growing up, I was a hip hop dancer. I was listening and watching, MTV Raps. I was listening to Queen Latifah, and just the lyrics. And I think about the beginning of hip hop, right? Like it was actually the language of the oppressed. And it's why, as an organizer, I bring in artists like my son, because my mentor, the person that I worked for 20 years, whose name is Harry Belafonte, was an artist himself, always said that his mentor taught him artists are the gatekeepers of truth, their civilization's radical voice. And so what you see in the work that I do, whether it's organizing a campaign to free Meek Mill or take a knee with Colin Kaepernick, or, I jump from like my childhood to like the work that I do. But, everything that we do is cultural organizing. We go into these institutions. If you go into a bank and you become a teller, what they do is they strip you of your culture. But we're cultured people, so why not organize culturally? Why not bring people together through the culture? When my son was talking about the program that we ran in the detention center, I was teaching young people bars behind bars, bringing in artists like my son that can relate to these young people and actually help these young people understand the mechanism of not just like spitting bars, but writing bars and ultimately producing your own bars, right? Because at the end of the day, they're gonna get out of that system. We also brought in people like the Mortal Technique. We brought individuals to a lot of our rallies around Eric Garner. We brought influencers and people, I don't know if I could say people's names, but, it was like Rhapsody, Common, Russell Simmons, like everybody was showing up because we were clear in our message, right? And so for me, one of the things that I felt my son brought to the table, and I love, like when my son would come, my son was a person we were fighting for, right? When we talk about Black Lives Matter, it was Black men being killed at the hands of police, and therefore we need to create room for not for us to just advocate for my sons, but to actually have him be a decision maker, to tell us how to advocate for them. And one of the things that I loved about my son is a lot of times the activists that were so woke were like, oh, my son says things that are inappropriate. And I'd be like, yo, but like that's what people say when they're coming out the system. And it's our responsibility to like invite them in with love. And so a lot of the things that we do at the Gathering for Justice or Justice League NYC, we also, one of the other things that I did is I'm one of the 4 national coaches of the Women's March on Washington. And so the things that I learned under Harry Belafonte prepared us, because my son, Jules, several folks folks here at Natasha, we all came together like Voltron to organize the largest single-day protest in the history of the world. And we used artists to share and amplify the work. And so when I think about politics, right, and I think about hip-hop, our music, when I think about like KRS-One, MC Light, Queen Latifah, all these folks, the music was political because our identities are political. They were, during the time that hip-hop was founded, it was during the backdrop of economic downturn, of community gang violence, of police surveillance, and what hip-hop was, it was more than a genre, it was actually the voice for the voiceless. It was an opportunity for us to express ourselves, to tell our stories in a way that was going to reach the masses. And yes, it started on a block, but hip-hop is global, right? Our attire, the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we interact with each other is hip-hop. And that's how come I started with my childhood, because when I was young, I didn't know I was Chicana. I didn't know I was Mexican. You know, my father comes from this country before it was the United States. And so I didn't really know what I was. And so I used to say I was hip-hop and basketball. That was my identity. And I knew how to break dance. I was the person that was, bringing down the cardboard for my brother. But that's the way in which we battled. And we didn't have to battle with violence. We battled with like popping our fingers and, spinning and, fronting, all those different things. And also with our lyrics, with our voice. And I think it's so different now because of the fact that in everything, capitalism just takes over and it produces this machine that destroys our communities. When you think about Method Man and his lyrics, cash rules everything around me, praying to get the money, dollar, dollar bill. Yo, he was talking about capitalism, right? When you think about the lyrics of, West Coast All-Stars, we're all in the same gang. When you think about Public Enemy, Fight the Power, Nipsey Hussle, fuck Donald Trump, it was all, this music is political, and it's because our identity is political.
Wow. I just wanted to say something about what she just said. What she basically said, and it spoke to my heart, is that's why we do what we do. Because it is in us. She's basically talking about her childhood. That's who she is. These gentlemen, that's who they are. So we all have a higher calling in a way to find out how can we improve the lives of others within our communities. And that framework of hip hop is so powerful. If we were just to find a way that we can collectively come together from an educational standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from bringing in, as my brother said, I keep pointing to him because I really love his story. He talked about the real estate sector, the healthcare sector. I mean, all the different sectors of the economy. Hip hop is in all of that. So how do we now come together and find a way that we can have those same access to those same services and access to being entrepreneurial in those areas and access to technology and all the other things that our young kids would need to be able to compete, whether you're competing with people in China or you're competing with people in Europe. Our young people need to be able to compete as well. And we need to do everything that we can, utilizing hip hop, organization, coming together with a plan of action of how we can now impact that. That's all I wanted to say.
So wonderful about bringing you guys in. This is like so many thoughts about this, but you have me thinking about some of the artists mentioned. I mean, a lot of artists, like a Public Enemy was mentioned, like an Immortal Technique, they're talking about politics directly in their lyrics, and they're engaging directly in that. And then you have artists like a Cardi B, who does party music, she does WAP, but I know she just made a big shakeup in New York politics like last month when she posted an Instagram Live talking about Eric Adams' budget cuts, and she reached, 10 billion people with her Instagram Live in a way that the budget cuts hadn't, my reporting wasn't going out there as much as Cardi B talking about it. So I want to ask you, and I'll start with my son, but really, I want to bring in everybody on this. Do hip-hop artists is there a responsibility to talk about these conscious lyrics, talking about good stuff in there, or is there a way to engage in social justice, be a good influence, even if you're rapping about drill rap and talking about murder, but can you do good on the side, that kind of thing?
You asked the right person to say that.
So what I will say is, I think anyone with levels of influence have a responsibility. When you have the ability to influence the minds and the culture, and people actually pay attention to what you say, then there's responsibility that comes with that. We can't just, everything is not just an entertainer. No, when you speak, people are paying attention. You have millions of followers that actually pay attention, understanding that if you don't do politics, politics does you. And I'll give an example of what's happening to young blood now, right? I remember years ago, somebody came to me and they asked him that question. They said, you don't feel the need to talk about what's going on in the community, talk about, things that are going on in the Black Lives Matter, this and that. And he said, I don't want to talk about none of that. I don't pay attention to none of that. I'm just here doing my business. I don't want to talk about it. Right? And now today, we have people advocating, politicians advocating that lyrics that are being used against him don't be used against him, right? And I know in hindsight, right, he's probably sitting there saying to himself, I needed to be involved in that, right? I needed to speak up back then, because we don't never want to wait till it's actually us that are being oppressed. We are actually the victims of it. Like a lot of times, people don't want to be involved in what's going on. Or I'm taking care of me and my family. Until something happens to their family, I see it all the time. Doing this work, people in my DMs all the time, right? They never got involved in that. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with you wanting help, but just understand that don't wait till you need help, right? Don't speak up when it only affects you. Just understand that they come for me in the day, they're gonna come for you at night. And we say this all the time, if you don't do politics, politics is gonna do you. And I think that's what we experience, especially artists. A lot of our artists, my sister Tamika Mallory wrote a book called State of Emergency, and the foreword of the book is Angela Davis talking to Cardi B about this exact same thing, because Cardi doesn't know if is there a place for her in this movement. Is her voice valuable in this movement? Should I be talking about it? I talk about street things, and I'm just a regular hip hop artist. Is there a place for me? Should I just be quiet? And Angela Davis said there's definitely a place for you. She talks about how she went to visit, who was that prison that she went to visit? A singer that she literally sat down with the singer who was in prison and talked about how it was important that singer utilized her voice, to talk about what was going on, to fight for the movement. So it's definitely needed, all of our voices are needed. And I love that Cardi does that. I love that she, despite people telling her, oh, you should be quiet, shut up and dribble. I love when LeBron decides that y'all gonna say something about this. I love it when Kyrie decides he's gonna say something, because we need those platforms. We need people to understand that our liberties, our freedoms are worth more than just our jobs. We need people to understand that we are willing to sacrifice our jobs and things that are tangible for our justice and our humanity. So I think all of us have that responsibility. I think every artist, everybody, every one of us, not even just artists, if you just are one person and you know that something is wrong, and you have something, you can tell, and you can do anything. I think all of us have an entry point into this movement, into trying to seek the beloved community. All of us have an entry point, and we should utilize our power.
It's talk about that. Ooh, it's tricky too. It's a hotbed of contention right now, ain't it?
Yeah.
And if you say something, you get canceled. If you say free Palestine, it's over with for you, right? That's why it comes down to ownership. You can be $1 million slave, still nigga. Right? Didn't Jay-Z say that? Yeah. But I'm OJ, okay. Still nigga, right? And that's what's going on. You know, you may want to. You may want to speak up when you get that call, hey, I don't think you should say that. I think you should just tone it down. And then all of a sudden they tweet delete. It's the world we live in, man. When people don't own their shit. When a lot of people don't own their stuff, you are beholden to the people who hold the purse strings. And look, I get it. You know, I tend to not disagree, or I tend to disagree, but I understand. I understand that you came from a situation that was not favorable, you and your family, and you brought your family out of poverty. Your whole family's eating good. Y'all ain't dodging bullets. Y'all ain't missing no meals. The kids in private school, and then boom, black guy gets shot by the bullets. And you want to say something, you call your publicist, and they're like, oh, you may lose some revenue for that. This is really happening right now.
It's true.
It's happening. You see on the aggregate how many people don't say anything versus people who do? It's because they probably have creative freedom in their deals. Actors, artists, people in hip hop, people in country, like it is difficult to be in a situation to where the way you're feeding your family may be at jeopardy if you say something publicly about an issue, especially if people feel like it has nothing to do with you, right? That's why, you know, say what you want to say about BLM, it was so prolific because it allowed everybody to speak up. For the first time in a long time, people were able to speak up and say, you know what, F that, I'm going to say BLM. And people were able to do that and then feel comfortable in that. And then what happened? They came for it, you know, and they tore the trees and all them down quick, right? So what's the reality we're living in is, gotta give a little bit of grace. Gotta give a little bit of grace. Because if it was you and your job, and you wore your little shirt saying Free Palestine, and your boss was like, hey, listen, you know, I get it, I understand, but can you put a sweater on? Oh, no, I'm leaving, I quit. Really? You gonna quit? When you got bills and a mortgage, right?
Because babies are getting killed, yes.
Yes. But it's a real situation.
10,000 babies.
It's a real situation that you have to give people a little bit of grace. And you may not agree, but you have to understand. Because we live in a society right now where people are choosing sides and saying, well, you have to be, it's a zero-sum game, and you have to be one way, and if you're not that way, I'm going to cancel you. And that's not the world I want my kid to grow up in. There's a mutual understanding, but I do agree, last thing I'll say, I do agree that if you are an artist and you have a platform, that you should pick an issue, you should go hard for that issue. You should pick an issue and go hard for it. But that doesn't mean that you got to jump on every single issue and speak out and jeopardize your money, because a lot of people wouldn't, and you can say what you want to say, but at the end of the day, you know that people would step down and be like, well, maybe I'll just, you know, find my activism another way. Maybe I'll donate. You know, it's just really, really tough.
I want to channel my inner Harry Belafonte. You know, I got to sit with this man, you know, Mr. B had been blacklisted for his affiliation and his association with Dr. King. And he was called a communist. And what happens, right, if you study the movement, they did this to Kwame Ture, right, and SNCC. They called them anti-Semitic. And so what they do is they kill your character, your name, and that makes it even easier to assassinate you. And then, like, everybody has movement amnesia, so then, like, 60 years later, we got MLK, we got, you know, beloved, everything's MLK and everybody's praising him. But the reason I want to channel Mr. B is because I learned about how he would bring artists to the movement. And they were the ones that were not just rejuvenating the people that were marching from Selma to Montgomery, but they were also the ones that were giving money to the movement. They were the ones that were, and you know, and we could get into a whole other conversation about philanthropy and what it's become now. But I remember Mr. B often talked about how, you know, his affiliation to Dr. King allowed Dr. King to have access that, and that's something that I say, you know, when I talk about our relationship to my son, is my son was like, look, we gotta go on Height 97 and talk to Ebro, and we gotta go on Charlemagne the God and the Breakfast Club. So my son was like taking us at 6 in the morning to these radio shows, but it was hitting a broader audience than we could ever reach as activists or as individuals working in community. And so there's a role, there's a lane for everybody. You know, when my son was talking about there's a role for you, there's a lane for everybody. Whatever gift you have, it's what Mr. B used to say, bring that to the cause, bring that to the movement. And he used to organize other artists to come and show up and to amplify the voices of the people that were on the front lines. And I think what happens nowadays, as somebody who got canceled publicly because of my leadership in the Women's March, or something that was false and it went all over the world, I will say that ultimately, when you speak the truth, they will come after you. And there's a moment when you don't think you could get through it, but you actually can. And I think about the money. You talked about ownership. Everybody on here talked about ownership. Then that should make us reevaluate who is owning all of these things and where this money is coming from. If we're so afraid to speak up. Because I cannot be in a position where I have a platform and I am silent. And a lot of people do get canceled, but it's because of the fact that they also say some really bogus shit. You know, sorry, the kids here and elders, my apologies. They say some really bogus things. Like I look at social media and I'm one of those people that my husband is talking about, like just scrolls. It's either food, makeup, lashes, you know, style, and then social justice. Because, you know, I work in the trenches every day, so I really try not to watch that. But when I do, and I see these images, and I want to say something, it does take me back to the time when I got canceled. And it does take me back to a time that was very dark. But then I think about, then who is going to speak for this community? So there is a role that people of influence need to have, and they need to be on the right side of justice. And then I will also say, there are some activists, you know, because I sit at this intersection of activism and politics, and I would say, I don't know if it's music or hip hop, but I hear a lot of activists saying, you know, just be an artist. You ain't got no right to speak up on behalf of our community. And we gotta stop assuming that people and artists especially from the hip hop world, don't come from our community, because they actually grew up in our communities, right? And they experience the same thing. And maybe we just need to like bring a Myson or a Jay or a you or anybody to come and sit with these people and just educate them. And so when I think about the grace, I also think about how do we create a bridge between those of us that have access to these circles, have access to these, you know, elected officials that are doing great work, and those influencers that just need a little bit more education on the issue.
Powerful right there, powerful. And, you know, I want to be clear here. The Hip Hop Hall of Fame, when it was created, it was not created to be this institution that sits up on a hill. The Hip Hop Hall of Fame was created to be a living, breathing organism of the community and of the culture. So anything that's happening in the culture or being identified in the culture in hip hop should be spoken by the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. That is our role. That is our responsibility. Now, as a nonprofit 501c3, and I will say, by the way, before I finish, we are going to put a project here in Queens. We've been moving kind of quietly about it, but I'm letting you know it's more like a Hard Rock Cafe piece, but Queens need a permanent place, and the Hip Hop Hall of Fame is working with some folks quietly, and that's all I'm going to say on it, but I'm letting you know Queens is home, and if I'm doing something everywhere else, you know we got to make sure we come home.
That's right.
So I want to make sure I said that. So, So the Hip Hop Hall of Fame is a living, breathing organism. So what does that actually mean, right? It's not hyperbole. What I'm saying is, as a group of artists coming from pioneers to the golden era, to the, I call the 90s the platinum era, right? To the 2010s, all the way to where we are right now. How do we bring us all together collectively, right? Without judgment. And then how do we look out for our brothers and sisters who are coming out from an incarceration situation or growing up in homes where they don't have access to, food? They have a food desert, right? We have food deserts, we got homelessness, we got so many other issues. So I'm thinking, from the Hip Hop Hall of Fame perspective, we must touch areas and work with those on this panel and those in the community, elected officials. We're not just about politics, because as a nonprofit, we can't just be in the politics, but we are a service organization. So we can serve, right? So I want to make sure that I put it out there that we're open to working with our community on how do we get our credit repaired so that you actually can get an apartment and buy a home, right? How do we have access to get past the redlining, whereas you can now get the mortgages that you need at an affordable rate, even though they're kind of high right now, by the way. Same thing for good schools and get the things that we need for our kids to be able to compete, whether that's the right books and not, and that's good teachers as well, right? I know that's a certain kind of word, but I'm just saying it. So I'm thinking if we can form an alliance together across all of our entities, we can come out as a unified voice, and I don't think we have to worry about being canceled at that point, because now it's an organic movement, but it's about positive, not talking about others, talking about how can we improve ourselves and own our home.
You got it. So I want to open this up to some audience questions momentarily, but one final question for both of you guys. I know you've done a lot of work in New York, nationally, probably even beyond that. And hip-hop is cool. Hip-hop makes money. We've talked about corporations trying to use hip-hop, politicians, not Natasha, but other politicians trying to use hip-hop, donors, whatever. So I'm wondering, who's real? Do you have any examples of whether it's, power players, politicians, corporations who've been like actually with you and you trust and they're good with it?
I'm looking at Jules.
I'm going to be honest with you, because we're in a public forum. I wouldn't want to put that kind of pressure on those folks that are really behind the scenes making things happen. I can tell you right now, we had to raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and a lot of that money didn't come from people who look like us. But there's people that actually really care, And I will say, she talked about philanthropy. What is philanthropy now? That was a whole other topic that she brought up. I don't want to call out individuals' names, but I will say this. There are certain corporations who say that they wanted to put money away for black communities and black businesses. I haven't seen the money yet, just to let you know I have been knocking on the doors, right? But we're still looking for it, right? And so whether you're even talking, and I will mention this, whether you're talking about a Goldman Sachs and Solomon and them, or you're talking about BlackRock and a few other folks, those folks have set up certain funds that we're just trying to make sure we have access to, because we have projects that are backed and secured by real estate. It shouldn't be an issue. But as an African American, we always run into that one key word, a guarantor. Yeah. And we don't have very many black billionaires, you know what I mean? But if we can find a way, like I said, to collectively pull our resources together, I don't think we have to look outside of ourselves to actually accomplish the things that we want.
We have some partners that we work with. However, I think a lot of our power comes from the people. And it doesn't come from institutions, or it doesn't come from philanthropy and the money. It comes from the people power, because one of the things that we realize is that, there's going to be somebody who brings the baked goods. There's somebody else who's going to bring, the meat or the rice or the beans, whatever it may be. But oftentimes, the investments that are made in our communities are short-term investments. And so there's no long-term investment in our community. That's why we're consistently running. We're consistently on this short, span. We have to hurry up and do things, right? We got TikTok, Instagram that consistently proves that. And although we have partners, I will say that because of the fact we're consistently moving and trying to get investments or we're trying to get funded, we're not able to really plan for the next 20, 50 years. And our communities suffer because of that. And I really hope that there is a moment in which we think about the long game and not the short game. You know, there's initiatives that I'm working on. One of them is called the Next 250. And I'm working on helping rewrite the Declaration of Independence to become the Declaration of Interdependence, looking at the next 250 years and organizing with communities, having listening sessions with organizations and individuals like yourself to really dream, like have a dreamstorm, right? We don't necessarily ever get to do that. We don't get to talk about what's happening now, what's gonna happen in 10 years, what's gonna happen in 30, 40, 50. And I think about my son. I was 40 years old when I had my first child. His name was Jay Marcel, was named after his father. And my 5-year-old is a futurist. This young man has me studying the ocean and the stars and the moon and Venus and all, I mean, things I never even thought about because I'm too busy like trying to mobilize for an action or a visual, right? But this young man, so when I think about the future, he has me thinking about those things. Like, yo, we may not even be on Earth if we ain't taking care of Mother Earth in a couple of years. We may have to go to another solar system or to another planet to figure out how we even, you know, people are talking about bunkers nowadays. I don't know if y'all even saw, but they're building a $100 million bunker out in Hawaii, one of these billionaires. We need to have those conversations, right? And I think one of the things that hip hop did and can do is that hip hop gave us a vehicle for us to express ourselves, and I think hip hop could give us a vehicle for us to think about our future and actually have something that will allow us to thrive in our communities and not necessarily be the victims of all this oppression that's happening.
Yeah, with that, I do want to open it up to audience questions. If anybody wants to, I guess, stand up and, you know, you've learned a lot about our panelists. We've learned so much about these topics. Feel free if anybody has one. Please. Thank you.
I'm an artist myself. I'm a designer. King Slockman. Look him up if you get a chance. And one day he was doing music, and I said, new music. I said, I don't think you should